Previously on EnigmaBro Ball Z.
I wonder what happens if I do this with Jimmy Carter's Pro Tennis Tour.
So let's try it, shall we? Wow, wasn't that amazing? Yes, I know I've got a new shirt on. Shut up. New year, new shirt. Let's now actually talk about some cancelled video games, and I just have to say, I am thankful you released my beloved. And you, and you, and you, and you, and not you. I don't think many people have ever considered how many games never see the light of day. For as many games that end up getting released, even more never see past the concept stage. Some get prototypes and some are finished then cancelled at the last minute. It's a shame, some of these games look like they could have been really great, but of course, we couldn't have them. Instead, we have to have Calculator for Nintendo Switch. There is a whole world of cancelled video games that we don't even know about, so I'm gonna go over some of the ones that I thought were the most interesting to discuss. With that in mind, of course I'm not going to talk about the NES port of Thomas the Tank Engine for the Super Nintendo. Surely not. There are games and well-known franchises that can be cancelled, such as Donkey Kong Fun with Music. Can you see why I'm so interested in these games? Imagine what the world would have been like if that had released. Good. But make sure you don't think too hard while I explain to you the story of Cheetahmen 2, because for some reason, somebody explodes every time I tell this story. But I'm going to tell it anyway despite the risk, so you've been warned. The Cheetahmen were mascots created for the game Action 52, which was an NES multi-cart with 52 horrible games created just for it. The game costed $199 US, and not many people bought it. Well, I didn't buy it, and even if I wanted to, I couldn't physically buy it because I didn't exist yet. So if we go by that logic, nobody bought it. The creators, Active Enterprises, wanted to capitalize on the success of the Ninja Turtles with their mascots, so they planned a sequel which was never released. Now, buddy or pal, you better listen to this as I tell you a story, because this is the part where everyone tends to explode, and I don't want you to explode, so don't think! This tale takes place in the year 1996. 1,500 copies of Cheetahmen 2 get discovered in a Florida warehouse, so people took those copies of the games and put them on sale on the second-hand market. And to this day, this game costs a whole lot of moolah. If the game had been released, the only thing that would have changed is just that the story surrounding the game would be less interesting. The game would still be ridiculously overpriced to this day, much like Action 52, and the game still would have sucked complete balls. And the Cheetahmen wouldn't have become a successful franchise, unlike Superman. Speaking of Superman, he has seen quite a few unreleased games. One is a PS1 port of Superman 64, and another was an NES game that was being made by Sunsoft, until they lost the license and renamed the game to Sunman, and then proceeded to cancel Sunman as well. Another unreleased game that ended up getting rebranded was Thrill Kill on the PS1. The game was cancelled because it received an adults-only rating, preventing it from being sold in many different stores. So they ended up changing it to a game about the Wu-Tang Clan. Yes, I am being dead serious. And if you really think I'm messing with you, then bringing up the cancelled Thunder in Paradise game on the Super Nintendo probably isn't going to do me any favors. I don't see how the original pitch succeeding was a good idea. Maybe it was due to the novelty of playing as Hulk Hogan in a Super Nintendo game, but I mean, WWF Super WrestleMania is standing right there, just grab it. And while I'm on a wrestling tangent, here's WWE Titans Parts Unknown on the PS2 and Xbox. Not much is really known about this one. Some sources say it's a one-on-one fighter, but all that exists of this game is concept art. And with that, I can't really tell what type of game this is supposed to be. And speaking of sources, remember, this is the internet, so don't trust everything you see online, because someone can make up literally anything, just like the sequel to WWF No Mercy, which was known as WWF Backlash. People claim that this game was going to be released on the Nintendo 64 in 2001, and the only proof they had of this was this screenshot right here. But this isn't even good proof, but apparently it was good enough for the good old clickbait YouTubers. If you're pretty knowledgeable in wrestling, you would immediately notice that The Undertaker is wearing his attire from 2004, and the fact that Sting just flat out wasn't in the WWF in 2001. It's ridiculous that wrestling fans believe this until 2020, when Sanders Keel, the THQ producer of wrestling games, went on a podcast that I just can't say the name of without bursting into laughter. He was asked about the game, where he ended up saying that the game just never existed, and that Aki wanted to create wrestling games on the PlayStation, but THQ already had a deal with Ukes to make the games on Sony's platforms. So Aki went on to work with EA to create the Def Jam games. So the lesson here is don't trust idiots who can't think of a better gimmick than wearing a top hat. Instead, check out Face Gaming Man for real gaming videos. Say, do you remember when I was talking about Donkey Kong Fun with music? Well, that segue was for cancelled games and well-known franchises. So I'm just gonna casually reuse that segment without you nosing, as I talk about Kid Kirby. Kid Kirby was meant to be a prequel to the series, where you played as a young Kirby with hair. And thank gosh that didn't release, because it being canon that Kirby had hair would have ruined my day. And not just my day, but many people's day, but now that I think about it, probably only I would really only be bothered by that much. What? Speaking of sad, you wanna know something really sad? The amount of Diddy Kong Racing sequels that were cancelled. Diddy Kong Racing was released by Rare in 1997 after Rare wanted to create a kart racer on the Nintendo 64, and in my opinion, a better kart racer on the Nintendo 64 than Mario 64. Mario Kart 64, not Mario 64, Mario Kart 64. The kart is important. If I said that Diddy Kong Racing was better than Mario 64, I would be dead. Though I kind of feel that way. But hey, I've only played with Mario's face, so I don't really have a true experience of Mario 64. I think Rare knew they had something special, which is why they tried to make multiple sequels. The first one being Donkey Kong Racing on the GameCube. The game was first shown at Space World 2001, and after the Microsoft buyout, they tried to rework the game as Saberman Stampede Racing. That also got cancelled. There was also Diddy Kong Pilot on the Game Boy Advance, which was reskinned and re-released as Banjo Pilot. And then, in 2004, Climax Studios was developing Diddy Kong Racing Adventure for the GameCube. They considered having Banjo and Conker be playable characters, but they had been Microsoft properties for 2 years at that point, so that obviously wasn't gonna happen. As sad as all these cancellations make me, at least we got Diddy Kong Racing DS, which I know it's not a reboot, but it's better than nothing. And speaking of reboots, Skate or Die was gonna get a reboot that was gonna be released on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. It was going to be published by EA and developed by Criterion Games, the developers of Airblade, a game where you are on a hoverboard, so they had experience with boarding games. If you are familiar with the Skate or Die games, you would know that these were absolutely terrible, but this game looks like it could have been good. Of course, I can only speculate based off the 3 photos we have and my previous experience playing Airblade, but this game was going to have some really interesting concepts. The game was going to let players freely move around the levels on foot, enter shops to buy skateboards, and interact with NPCs. This game was going to be published by EA, but unfortunately they had more ambitious plans for the game. Which I know that sounds good, but not in this scenario. EA told Criterion Games that they couldn't just make a Tony Hawk game. No, the game needed to be more like Grand Theft Auto. Criterion really didn't know what to do with that, and it was just impossible to meet the demands that EA were giving them. So they decided to quit the project before it entered development hell. You know, mate, I'll be really surprised if you couldn't tell that I'm an Australian. Like, can't you see I got my beer that's unopened because I'm underage and I have to have a parent around if I want to drink, but there's no parents around so I can't actually drink it on camera. But you know what franchise that really sits close to home with me? Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. Ty the Tasmanian Tiger represents Australian culture perfectly, from the characters, locations, and the most Australian dialogue you will ever hear.
I reckon those dunnies are a complete waste of space. Only last week I used one, walked 2 blocks, was clobbered by a frill, and then woke up back on the dunny, which was the best place to be given the surprise I got. Julius reckons it's got something to do with the space-time conundrum. But if you ask me, I think it's a load of bull dust.
Developed by Australian developers Chrome Studios, after they had finished development on Ty 3, Night of the Quicken, they got to work on a 4th game known as Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 4, Gunyip. This was going to be an air shooter that focused on flight missions. The game was eventually cancelled so Chrome Studios could work on Star Wars, The Force Unleashed. I feel like we can all agree, whether you love them or you hate them, that the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise is a bit of a messy one. Which is really fitting considering how messy the development of Sonic X-Treme was. Sonic X-Treme was being developed for the Sega Saturn by Sega Technical Institute, until it got cancelled due to having too many issues and being stuck in development hell. SDI had originally split themselves into 2 teams, one to work on the level engine, and one to work on the boss engine, essentially making this 2 games in one. When representatives from Sega of Japan went to SDI's headquarters to see how the game was doing, they were unimpressed with the level engine, but they loved the boss engine, and requested to rework the entire game into that engine. By then, the team was running out of manpower, and they had to finish the game before a Christmas 1996 deadline. Because of this deadline, programmer Christina Coffin was overworking non-stop to try and get the game complete, until she ended up coming down with pneumonia, and because she was leading the technology end, on top, of creating the game's engine, the project had to be indefinitely delayed because the team couldn't continue without it. Another cancelled Sonic game is Sonic X-Treme. This game was pitched to Sega by Vision Cape Interactive. It contained Sonic racing Shadow on a skateboard in a seaside hill looking area. The pitch failed due to a lack of interest from Sega. Another cancelled Sonic game,
I swear this is the last one,
is Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 3. This was going to be the last one in the series, and it was going to be developed by Sega Studios Australia, unlike the previous episodes which were developed by Dimps. The only evidence of this game's existence is an unused cutscene that was found in beta builds of Sonic 4 Episode 2, that showcased the Master Emerald glowing with the silhouette of Knuckles and the Death Egg reactivating itself above Earth, as it cuts to white saying, "To be continued." Oh, is it? If it was, I wouldn't be talking about it right now, that's for sure.
but that's enough about Sonic, a franchise with many different games. Let's show some love to the games that didn't even get the chance to become a franchise. Oh heck, even a first game.
Starting off with Boo! A platformer that was being developed by Microprose for the Super Nintendo, Sega Mega Drive, and the Amiga in 1994. They wanted to create a universe with the main character being a cool ghost named Boo, whose method of attacking is yelling Boo at an enemy to scare him away. The game was finished, but unfortunately, Microprose were in rocky financial times and didn't have enough money to release the game. So the game has now become lost to time because of that. Gosh, I hate money. I really want to play Boo, it seems cool.
And the final game we're going to take a look at, and I think it's the most interesting one. Actually, not really. Donkey Kong Fun with Music is still unreleased. But this is still pretty interesting. We're going to talk about Timber 64.
Who here has played Diddy Kong Racing? If so, do you remember Timber? You know, the orange tiger guy? Never mind. Remember him or not, there was apparently going to be a 3D platformer about him that was developed by Rare on the Nintendo 64. But the game's existence is actually unknown. While some former Rare employees don't remember the game existing, while others can perfectly describe a prototype for a game they created. The reason for this may have been caused by how the studio was organized back then.
From what I've heard and what I understand, apparently different teams within Rare would be working on different games at the exact same time without knowing what the other team was working on.
The game got cancelled so they could work on Diddy Kong Racing, and then later they were making another Timber game, which eventually became Star Fox Adventures.
Poor Timber. I just really feel bad for the guy. He never got his chance at the spotlight, and just like all these other cool games, they never got their chance. Instead, we just had to have